Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. This week on Careers in Discovery, I'm with Adam Glen, CEO of Unicorn Bio, to talk about his journey from academia to building a biotech company that's tackling one of the biggest pain points in life sciences. In a candid conversation, Adam talked to us about balancing his love of science with a growing entrepreneurial drive and learning from the highs and lows of startup life. We talked about making the leap from research to business, the importance of being driven by curiosity, embracing uncertainty, and continuous learning. So I'm back on Careers in Discovery with Adam Glen of Unicorn Bio. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. That sounds like the cliched thing you say when you
That's what everybody says.
Yeah.
Well, we're very glad to have you. No, look, I always like to start these conversations by talking about what you're up to at the moment, and really interested to talk more about Unicorn Bio. Obviously, cell manufacturing, but there's lots of interesting things that you're doing around that. Can you tell us a bit about the business and where you're at?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of have two arms to the business. One of them is a machine side, and the other one's more of a like cell development and services side.
Mm-hmm.
So on the machine side, this is my own pain point. Scientists spend an inordinate amount of time moving liquids between containers.
Right.
Biology is basically, well, from research and development, it's a fluid movement handling problem.
Mm-hmm.
So one element I spent most of my life, a good chunk of my life, on is something called cell culture. So the growing of cells, which I'm sure everyone knows about.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked in large companies and thought this would all be automated, and it's kind of not. So we've kind of built from the ground up automation systems that culture cells automatically, if they're a stem cell, differentiates them, things like that. So it kind of has applications all across R&D and manufacturing. So from cancer research through cell therapy through to potentially alternative proteins. It's kind of an underpinning thing that's found everywhere. So we figured we'd build machines to try and do this. And then without using too many buzzwords, like machine learning, which I'll use anyway, we couple inputs and outputs so that we iteratively get better outputs. We're trying to exceed the performance of humans because humans are our most variable thing in the process in addition to the biology. Mm-hmm. So it sounds horrible, we want to remove them and augment them so they spend their time designing better experiments and doing other things other than moving liquid around. Then the other side of the business, it does a bunch of cell line engineering and sort of CRO type services. That's mainly come about because we tried to look for certain cell lines and we couldn't find any reliable suppliers of them. So we just made them, and then other people said, oh, we quite like them too. So we started supplying them to people, and we've got customers all over the place for those. And then it goes out like that, and it's a podcast. So you get a divergence of, I'm using my hands, it seems like a divergence of two different businesses, but they actually complement each other. So cell lines, CRO services, and then machines to do R&D and manufacture, they're all under the same thing. So hopefully that explains what we're doing and trying to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this obviously has implications across several different areas of biological research. Where's the focus for you guys?
So at the moment, like one of the things that we have a background in is stem cell biology. So there's a focus on cell therapy. So a lot of us have backgrounds either in human embryonic stem cell research or just pluripotent stem cell research. These cell types are particularly challenging to culture. So we think there's lots of without using the word opportunities, there's lots of opportunities for these to become therapeutic modalities, but there isn't really very good manufacturing paths
Okay.
to scale them up. So the focus is on the kind of the cell therapy side, but there's also, we have some ongoing projects on drug discovery and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, which is not just related to cell therapy, but related to a range of fields. So I've kind of answered that and said we're specific but general. So moment is IPS based cell therapy
Yeah.
things on the machine side.
No, that makes sense. And yeah, this is a problem that we come across a lot, is that there's incredible research going on into the potential of stem cells as therapies, as you say, and every single company developing them runs into the same problems, right? When it comes to actually making them at any sort of scale.
Yeah, so I mean, I spent a fair bit of time in academia, and
Mm,
there's things about academia that are great, and there's things that are maybe not so great. Um, they think about the purism of the idea and how it's going to change everything, and then and I've always had a more pragmatic view. It's like, okay, so you've made this cool tech in a very small dish in a university lab. How do you treat 10,000 people?
yeah.
How do we get this to actually help humans? And then they're like, oh well, we'll just manufacture it as if it's kind of trivial. It really, for anyone that's ever worked in manufacturing, they're like usually reasonably infuriated because it's not
Yes.
just like, oh, we just put it in this machine and we press the button. Well, if the machine doesn't exist, there's no machine in the first
Yep.
place. And then state of the art in cell therapy still to this day is people in labs fully gowned up in, masks and everything and stuff like that in tissue culture hoods with pipettes.
Yeah.
And that might work for a clinical trial of a few people, but it ain't gonna work if you've got to like treat thousands of patients, or tens of thousands, whatever number.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a shame that I love invention, but they don't think about the kind of downstream bit. So
Yeah.
that's hopefully why we exist. We kind of take the cool bits of invention from an academic mindset and then bring it into okay, how do we make it? How do we make it cost effectively? How do we scale it? How do we distribute it? All those kind of things then start to be like, and then you can feed that back into invention.
Yes.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I suppose there's probably two points of kind of insight to this, but I'm interested. At what point did you start looking at it as a fluid handling problem, and at what point did you go, actually, I'm going to start a business and do something about this? Because there's quite a big leap there from having the problem to, because this is not a simple
yeah,
problem to solve. This isn't inventing a widget to get your shoes on better
no,
or whatever.
yeah, yeah. Um, I'd say it happened over a. So one thing I always say that I try to use my frustrations as fuel.
Okay.
I spend so you got a couple of options in life. You can get annoyed with something and be like, I'm going to shout about it on the internet. It's like there's a GIF of Abe Simpson and the Simpsons shouting at a cloud because it's cast a shadow on him. It's kind of utterly pointless.
Yeah.
Or you can do the other thing is get annoyed and do something. So it probably happened is it partly is my character, but it's over about the last 15 years. So you do a PhD and you go, well, that's pretty cool. I quite liked it. It was also traumatic because you go into a lab and realize that your undergraduate degree prepares you for nothing, and you have no real world skills. And
Yeah.
then you got to teach yourself. And then you go, okay, I think I know what I'm doing now. And then you're like, okay, so I've done this research, I've published these papers. Is that my impact? And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of went, I'm not sure I'm making the impact I want to make in the world.
Yeah.
So I then switched into large industry. Um, so I won't name the company. I worked for a large industrial company and I joined them. Kind of quickly realized it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I thought there was going to be more, it sounds weird. I thought there was going to be more technology and there really wasn't.
Okay.
So I then ran away and went back to academia, which is unusual because most people go into companies where there's a more structured environment. Depends on your viewpoint. Career progression is a little bit more structured. And I ran away from that and went back to university sector.
Yeah.
Did some postdoc research, learned some new technical skills. So I sort of moved more from scientific R&D into engineering. Now, the engineers in our company will say, Adam, you're not an engineer. I'm a hobbyist engineer. I'm not a proper engineer. I
Right.
don't have a mechanical, electrical, or software background. I know enough to probably be a little bit dangerous. I can build things, but they're probably not great. Hence why we
Yeah.
hire better engineers than I am. So I kind of moved towards engineering, and then you start to go, hang on a minute, why is no one building like hardware solutions to this? So I started to play around with robotics, things like that. And then you sort of have this moment of like, hang on a minute, we don't need to use a robot arm to move fluids. We need to use things like pumps and other, the pump's been around for a long time. So you start to think about one of the things I like to do is strip problems down to their base level and
Right.
go, what is the minimum thing I need to do to solve this problem? And then work back up from there.
Yeah.
So it kind of, hopefully I've answered the question, it kind of happens as an evolution. So I had experience in an academic lab, and then I went out of academia and had experience in a company which is trying to do real world things to real world customers. And then I went back to academia. And then that's when I then ended up in startups, because startups is probably where I fit best.
Right.
And then you work in a couple of startups, and then, with no disrespect to the startups I worked in before, you realize no one knows what they're really doing.
Yes.
And then you go, okay, well, maybe I'll give this a go. So it
Yeah.
kind of happened over time. But I say that loosely as well, because I still, I don't know what point, but I kind of went, I want to start a biotech company.
Hmm.
So I then started to steer my career in that direction on
Yeah, I see.
purpose. Like I had a choice of, do I stay and try to become an academic lecturer? I was offered a position and I turned it down. And I don't know, my family thought I was having, I don't know, something wrong with me, because they're like, hang on a minute, but this is like a really stable job and a stable career. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I decided I didn't want that, and I actually made a bit of a pivot, and I volunteered in a social enterprise because I thought I wanted to. It was all about impact. I thought I wanted to start a social enterprise, and then I worked in a social enterprise, and realized I didn't want to start a social
Okay.
enterprise. They are hard businesses for different reasons, but cash flow is like it is a huge problem. And then I
Mm.
decided, well, why don't I just start with no disrespect to social enterprise, a proper business
Hmm.
and pay people properly.
Hmm.
So it kind of, I drifted like that, drifted the
Yeah.
way through.
And so then I guess it sounds like the principles that have really underpinned the business have been taking this problem and figuring out, right, how do let's take it back to first principles. This is
Yeah,
actually the problem we're trying to solve.
yeah,
What's the most straightforward way? What's the most effective, efficient, simplest way we
yeah.
can solve this problem? And it's not probably a simple solution, I expect, but that of course then has implications in terms of cost and in terms of time and effectiveness and all that kind of thing. Is that kind of the approach you've
Yeah, yeah,
taken?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so one of the things, so uh be careful I don't annoy anyone. So re people who've worked in robotics, and especially there's a big trend into humanoid system, things that look like
Mm-mm.
humans and have arms and legs and things. Yes, for some things this might be the solution. For a lot of other things, it is not. If we look at us as a species, like human beings, I'll speak for myself. I don't know. Actually, let's talk about Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt, is almost biomechanically great for a 100-meter sprinter.
Right.
Um, and he's honed his skill into that. Get him, I'm going to make something up, rock climbing. He might be terrible at it. And we're actually pretty poor multi-purpose tools when you think about
Mm.
specificity of tasks. So the roboticists, what they do is they go, we see humans and they do this and they articulate things like this. We'll just mimic it.
Right.
But if you look at like food production, can you imagine food production being done like that? You'd have thousands of people just in lines, first person chops it up. And there are to some degree, but they blend it with technology that's done in a
Hmm.
production line system. Um, yeah, you start to see things a little bit differently and you go, okay, so how do we strip it all back? And the good thing about doing that is robots are, maybe they'll be cheaper in the future. Maybe that's the argument for the robotics people, but they're quite expensive. So
Yeah.
if you go, okay, how do we strip out everything that's unnecessary at this time point and say, here is the end outcome we want,
Yes.
and it sells culture to this scale, to this volume, blah, 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 blah. And we go, how do we get there, but with the least amount of components? And then that brings all of your cost immediately down. And then in theory, from a business perspective, you can choose to pass some of that, the savings of those costs onto potential customers. And then you open up a market
Mm-hmm.
that didn't really exist before. Because if the capex requirements of, let's say, robotic systems is in the tens of millions, you've immediately shrunk your market size
Yeah.
to n number of customers that can afford that outlay. So we've gone, how do we strip out all the noise, make it cheap as well, not cheap as pop, make it as efficient as possible
Yes.
given the engineering constraints. If that slight tangent and ramble makes sense.
No, it does. It's, you still have to deliver at the right quality, but because you're thinking about the outcome but not replicating the method, you're
Yeah,
able to do it in a more direct fashion almost and eliminate some
yeah.
of that inefficiency.
Some of the things because
Yeah.
it's the classic. So this is where I sort of switch between my engineering and my science brain. Um, one of the people that used to work with us, he was like, you want to, I think our engineers say that you design things to do one thing relatively well, not 50 things
Mm-hmm.
mediocrely. So whereas robotics are actually a multi-purpose tool that often
Yeah.
does a lot of things quite badly.
Yeah.
May at this time point, I'll probably eat my words. Maybe in 10 years, somebody will like, it's a bit like, what was it, the interview with the guy that when the iPhone was released, he was like, oh, but it doesn't have a keyboard, so it's rubbish. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
this recycles on the internet forever. I've just gone, humanoids, they're never going to work, and then in 10 years' time we all have one in our kitchen or something like
yeah,
this.
exactly.
And I look like a Luddite. But from a process perspective, I do think it's still valuable to say, what are we trying to achieve? Strip it
Hmm.
down and build up from that rather than trying to shoehorn another technology into a space that it might not be the ideal thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's probably an argument as the technology gets better that if you are a biotech company and you have a lab and you need something that can do lots of different things, then perhaps that sort of
Yeah,
humanoid robot makes sense. But if
yeah,
you're doing what you're doing and you're doing, as you say, one thing or one set of things
yeah,
for multiple companies, then you
yeah,
can you can really specialize that process, can't you?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And we'll come back to Unicorn and the kind of journey you've been on with that company. But I want to talk a little bit, Adam, as well about how you got there. And we've touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to sort of go back a bit. Take us back to, I guess, the initial decision to do biochemistry, to get into science, to get into
okay.
healthcare and life sciences and things like that in the first place. Why that path for you?
So at school, the subjects I was was most intriguing to me was I did biology, chemistry, maths, and very briefly physics.
Okay.
Um, the reason for very briefly is I'm not a very good physicist. I don't think. I don't
Okay.
know. They're on their next level in ways. So at school, I was just I don't know why I was that or design were the two things that really interested me. My dad's a retired architect.
Okay.
My cousin's an architect. Another cousin's is an electrical engineer. So design and engineering, actually, if there is a family profession, is my family profession.
Hmm.
I'm the wild card that decided that I'd go off and do science. But yeah, I was always kind of interested in human biology. Just how did the body work? How does it do its things? Very briefly considered career in medicine,
Hmm.
then decided I was like, I started on a biomedical science degree. I actually started on a biology degree and quit after the first week because the lectures were all on plants.
Ah.
Plants were actually incredibly useful, as it turns out. But at the time, I was like, I don't want to learn about plants. So I switched to biomedical science. And then
Yeah.
biomedical science I discovered as a degree. was mainly frequented by people who didn't get into medicine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whereas I chose to do that. So the first couple of years were more all about human biology and the basis of, reworking all the lies you're told when you're in school of how they simplify things. And like, well, it actually doesn't work like that at all. Um, so yeah, I think that's fair. And then I did work experience in a lab when I
Hmm.
was in school. I can't tell too many of the details because they're probably not. I kind of loved it, the experimentation side. I was
Right.
like, this is great. This you get to like, I think this is the buzz all academics get. You get to potentially see a thing that no one on planet
Mm.
Earth has ever seen before.
Hmm.
That's it doesn't happen very often, but that's the dopamine hit. You're like, oh my God, I've just witnessed something or seen something that I don't think anyone else, maybe in the history of humanity, has ever seen.
Mm.
um, that's pretty exciting. So I really liked the research side of things. So yeah, that's how I kind of ended up like science as a base, and then research
Yeah.
was the thing that I moved into.
Yeah, and as you said, you went into industry, you came back into academia, you sort of
Yeah,
explored a few different paths in your career. You mentioned as well that at
yeah,
some point, and it's maybe hard to pinpoint this sort of entrepreneurial bug had taken root. This idea of starting a biotech company I would imagine at the beginning of some undisclosed description and that kind of things,
yeah.
and then you started to sort of somewhat consciously, somewhat unconsciously move your career that way. What do you remember about that and that turning
Well,
point in your career?
I love these kind of conversations because they're slightly, our memories are really infallible and they're
Yeah.
probably completely wrong. But so the entrepreneurial side, actually, weirdly, I've always done something that's, well, I counted up the number of jobs I've done. It's something insane amount. Like lots of these are temporary jobs. I've done
Mm,
like 40 jobs or something like that, and so far, I've always had some sort of either side job or side hustle that I've been
right.
doing since what did I do? Like probably since my A levels.
Okay.
I used to, I don't know, I was quite interested in computers. So before pre-internet, I didn't really think about setting up a computer business, but I used to build my own computers and
Hmm.
then sell them to other people because, or not, or sell the to other people wouldn't know how to do it, so I'd do it
Yeah.
for them. Things like that. So I've always had something like that. And then at undergraduate, I had, I don't know, any one time, 4 or 5 different jobs.
Hmm.
I used to find this, it's the past, so it's fine. I used to find jobs where I could leverage my time into multiples. So let's say, I don't know, um, you become a security guard and you need to do a night shift. You get paid to basically sit in a chair.
Yeah.
And in that time, you can use that time to do something else on top of that.
Yes.
So I used to look for jobs that would allow me to stack those into multiples. So yeah, I've always done slightly quirky things on the
Hmm.
side that have absolutely nothing to do with my degree, science, anything like that. But it also taught me a lot about other industries as well, other industries that I might want to avoid
Yeah,
because
true.
like I was like, I appreciate that there are people on planet Earth willing to do these jobs, but this is not for me.
Hmm.
Anyone that works in hospitality and catering has my respect. But the unsociable hours, long, not necessarily the greatest pay.
Yeah.
So all of those things allowed me basically to, I was kind of experimenting through different career paths. So I don't know if that answered the question, but it happened over time. I've always been, I think I've always been entrepreneurial in some way.
Yes.
But then it was, you do some science, you think you know about science, then there's a classic diagram about this, like I think I know something, and there's a big trough where I know
Hmm.
nothing, and then you go back up again. So as you go along, you sort of go, oh yeah, I know, I kind of know about this now. And then you start to blend areas that other people may not have been able to blend together, because
Yeah.
you can either be the very best at one thing, which is actually really hard to do. So,
Yep.
like Olympic swimmers, rowers, they basically dedicate their life from the age of like 7 or 8 to that point for the tiniest of chance of winning like a gold medal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I admire them. It's not me. I'll take two things that I'm somewhat good at and combine them. And
Yes.
therefore, in that combination, I'm then in a zone where there are not that many people doing that kind of thing. So that's always
Absolutely.
kind of been my approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then when you sort of this seed arose of starting a biotech company, you obviously, you went and got more involved in startups and you exposed yourself to different things that you thought would help. What before starting Unicorn, what do you think were the most important things that you learned on that part of the journey? I'm sure there's lots that you've learned since starting the business as
Yeah.
well, but what were the things that
Yeah.
really prepared you for that, do you think?
I think, I don't know. I think if you're thinking about starting a biotech business, I think it makes sense to work in a startup biotech
Yeah,
business.
yeah, yeah.
It exposes you to the great bits and the awful bits. You're going in knowing with your eyes somewhat open, not entirely, because I actually went back to previous people that I've worked with in startups and had like lunch with them and said, I'm really sorry if I ever was pushy. Like, there's loads of things when you start to run companies, you do not, there's loads of things you can't communicate for
Yeah.
various reasons to the rest of the team. You don't want to because you want them to focus on that. You take that burden on, not to make it sound like the Lord of the Rings or something like this. Um, but yeah, there's loads of stuff going on that
Yeah.
not necessarily everyone's aware about. So I went back to a couple of people I used to work with and went, I'm really sorry if I was ever like that annoying person that was pushing for certain things without understanding the bigger picture. But that being said, it's still good. I'd highly recommend anyone that wants to try and work in a startup
Mm.
first, because it exposes you then to or in fact, even one of the things I gave feedback on. So some people that had interviewed with us, I kind of wrote like a blog post and then gave that back to all the people that we who
Yeah.
didn't come forward in the process. Even working in any business, especially small business, you get to see a different side to things. You're working in a small team. Roles are a little bit, you have a core function that you do, but everyone just steps outside of it
Yes.
from time to time because the business needs you to,
Yeah.
because there is no one else. So I'd say start up if you can, but any small business in almost any sector, these
Mm-hmm.
pains are felt because what is it? SMEs employ 70% of the population,
Yeah.
and the government seems to forget that all the time. And they go, oh, Apple, Google,
Mm.
Microsoft. No, most people are employed by an SME, and then it depends on your scale of the size of
Yeah,
it, whether it's a
absolutely.
10 person, 100 person, 1,000 person, whatever. But working in the smaller scale of business, you get to see the horrors as well.
Yeah, and your expectations get set at the right level, right?
Yeah,
Because if you work for, I don't know, for sake of naming, if you work for AstraZeneca,
yeah,
there's some part of you that even though you might intellectually know that not every company is like that, if that's all you've known, then you
yeah,
think, okay, yeah, it won't be like that for the first year, but after a year we'll be about the same sort of environment. And of course, it's billions and billions of dollars and what, almost 100 years that's taken them to get to the company
yeah.
that they are and the experience that you have. And so, yeah, I think, there's
People,
that, yeah, go on.
there's a me myself. One of the things I did previously, and this is being fair to the university sector, is that like I did research and development, and then purchasing. Like you would send off an order, and
Hmm.
it would happen sometimes very inefficiently, but it would happen. And the order would be placed, and the thing would arrive,
Yeah.
there's a whole set of processes that go on that you don't know about. And in any organizations, these processes have to be built. It's not just building the technology, it's building all the processes behind the company. And when you join a company at a later stage, you don't see any of the
No.
development to get to that point. You're completely naive to it. And I think when you then have to be like, how do we get, I don't know, I'm going to make some, how do we get CO2 supplied to the lab? How do we get it delivered? Who do we get it from? Oh, there's these 50 forms we need to fill in.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
we need to fill them in, but that process has been taken care of somewhere else by someone else. And until you get involved in these kind of everything a startup does, I think we're kind of blissfully ignorant of that.
Yes.
And then it also builds a lot of respect because I think that's another thing that we don't, I'm not the biggest fan of people are smart, but people also have egos. And we have a kind of saying that everyone gets in the trenches here. So
Mm.
everyone, everyone should be willing to do any job in the company. No, it's not beneath anyone. There's a time efficiency related to, cost of that employee relative
Yeah.
to a task, but people should still be willing to do that task if we really need them to do that.
Yes.
And you don't get that when you work in a large organization because a large organization by that point is theoretically optimized, and you usually just have a narrow role.
Hmm.
So you kind of, yeah, that's why I don't know. In one lectureship interview, I got the first question I got was, "Your career's all over the place. Explain that to us." They saw it as a negative, which I found a shame. I
Mm.
always was tempted to walk out of the interview. Um, the diversity is a good thing,
Yes.
like of experience. So big companies, small companies. So I'd actually maybe caveat my previous response with as much experience as you can cram into a short space of time. So if that's working for a big company for a bit and a small company, but if you do want to build a company, I think working in a small company is the best thing to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then since you've started the business, what do you think have been the key lessons?
Oh my God. I'm grinning. I'm grinning for anyone that's listened to this because there's loads of them.
Yeah.
I'll quote one of my previous line managers. I won't name her just in case. She doesn't approve of this, but she said, Adam, everything is a people problem.
Hmm.
And at the time, I said, you're wrong. Science and engineering is the base of everything. I was wrong. Everything is a people problem. People are the solution and also the problem most
Hmm.
of the time. I say this a lot. We all filter uh, through the prism of our own experience, of our own lived experience,
Yes.
and we all have, and that's where the diversity and the brilliance comes from. But there's times in which you go, I'm not sure how you were at the same event as me and took that your outcome was that, and mine was the
Yes.
polar opposite. So I used to be quite anti-meeting. I'm still anti-meeting to a degree, but there's a balance. There's some balance between over communication versus not enough communication.
Yes.
Um, Different people like to be communicated to in different ways, and you have to adapt all of those things. So I think for me, the biggest learnings have all been around kind of trying to be the leadership and management are two different things. It's probably
Yep.
trying to be a better manager, to yeah, not be like, I haven't got the time for this, so I'm going to send you a very brief and abrupt message, which can rub people up the wrong way.
Hmm.
And then the outcome, you don't get the right outcome because of that. Because we have logical bits, but we're emotional creatures.
Yeah.
And you have to be aware of that. So those have been the learnings. The other big learnings have been the more specific you can be in life about expectations and outcomes, the better.
Okay.
So I thought I used to be specific about things. Oh no, no, I wasn't. Because the in your head, you're like, yeah,
Yeah,
this is great. I know
absolutely.
exactly
Yeah.
what's going on. Getting that out is actually a lot harder than you realize.
Hmm.
It can be a little bit frustrating when you have to say things once and again in slightly different ways.
Yes.
But it's just how we operate. It's just how really good project managers operate. They're excellent communicators. And the other thing that bugs me, especially in academia, when we talk about soft skills versus hard skills, some of the soft skills are the hardest skills to
Yeah,
master.
absolutely.
Communication, negotiation, any list of things that are kind of human trait. These are really hard to master. These are
Hmm.
really difficult things to do really well. And I think hard science is can be collectively a little bit dismissive of this.
Yeah.
Um, but if you can master, if you can do a hard skill and in inverted commas a soft skill, well, you're beyond quite a lot of people. So yeah, it's more on the communication,
Mm.
management, and things like that. That those are the stuff for me personally have been eye-opening would be an understatement.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I always think that a lot of people we speak to who are scientists and engineers and have that kind of technical background, they get into that sort of work because they really like figuring out how things work and solving problems and things like that. One of the things I always think is that if you like that, then things like communication and management and leadership are some of the most fascinating problems you can try and solve because it's a constantly moving target. There's so many variables. What works with one doesn't work with another. What works with one in this situation doesn't work in this situation. And also, by the way, what worked with this person in that situation last time might not work next time because things have changed in so many different ways. And I think I find it a fascinating problem to solve, and whenever I get frustrated with people, that's what I always try to remember.
Yeah, but to sort of counter a little bit, with especially let's say I don't want to stereotype too much, but
Mm,
with an engineering mindset, one of the good things that maybe I'll broach this subject. I'll probably regret it, but engineering versus science. So
mm,
engineering is aim and outcome focused. Science is exploratory. That's the difference.
yeah,
So a scientist always wants to collect more information. They want to collect as much information as they can to have a complete picture, um, which sometimes isn't clashes with startup culture, which
right.
is how do we make decisions fast with the least amount of information you could ever imagine. Engineers on the flip side, they don't necessarily care about, I'll quote Feynman, stamp collecting. They care about like making a thing do a thing we want. The challenge there with engineering is, again, going back to specificity, is you have to be really specific to the point of what is the velocity of the fluid that comes out of a pipette? I have literally no idea. But the engineer needs to know that to build the thing
Yes.
properly. And sometimes when you give engineers unstructured problems, they can struggle to structure them because they don't have the underpinning experience of that. But they view the world as basically not bits and bytes, but like or binary completely. But they view it as much more rigidly, I would
Yes.
say, if you're building tangible things, because you need to view it like that.
Yes.
And then when they get the social side of some of that, sometimes, or the more fuzzy things, I know somebody else I know quotes it as fuzzy logic. Sometimes they run away from that because they're like,
Mm,
that's too much uncertainty. That's
mm,
too much for me. I know electrons do this if I apply current and voltage across it in this way because the laws of physics tell me so.
right.
And there's kind of a sense of security in that. So weirdly, sometimes if you're a really hardcore engineer, you want to be you're more introverted. You want to be left alone to solve a problem where there seems to be defined laws and rationale and logic, as opposed to fuzzy stuff, which is
Yes.
like, oh my God, the target's moved 50 times. How do I make any progress?
Yes. Yeah.
So
True.
so I don't know. This is because I sort of like this is where I'm more on the science side than the engineer side. But I've probably stereotyped. So if anyone that does listen to this is a science engineer, gonna get like hate of like, no, this is not how it works.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't think you've stereotyped too unfairly, though.
Yeah, no, I do enjoy I know some people don't like it, but the Big Bang Theory is a big favorite
Yeah.
because there's going back a little bit, you talked about the history and uh, one of the other skills that's quite important, again, it's a communication skill. I've worked on projects that have been across the European, they've been on EU projects. So I've worked with I was at that time I was the cell biologist on the project.
Hmm.
So physicists, engineers, different flavors of scientists. And for the outside world, it's sometimes hard to understand what the hell we're all talking about. But even internally, the way a physicist is, I'll give you an example, chemistry. So I moonlighted as a polymer chemist for a bit, badly. They call things a dry reaction, which means
Right.
without water. But at the time, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? The reaction is wet. There's a liquid around it. And they're like,
Mm.
no, but that's methanol. It's not water. And they refer to it, I hope I'm getting this right, anyone that's a chemist listening, but even the subtleties of that,
Yes.
when chemistry and biology talk to each other, they use their own vernacular and
Yes.
language. So that is quite that the communication between scientific disciplines are hard. So never mind about everybody
Mm.
else outside of that. So yeah, I can't remember why I got onto that tangent, but yeah. Um,
No, but it's interesting, and it's given that biotech is inherently it's an interdisciplinary sport, right? You've got to find ways
yeah,
to bring those people together in a way that's productive, and they don't necessarily
yeah.
have to like it, but
No, that's something I don't know why. I can't explain exactly why, but um, I, I that's something I really love is you get discipline A and discipline B, and you go, well, there's this good bit about discipline A, there's this
hmm.
good bit about discipline B. Let's mash them together. That's something I really love. It does come with a people problem sometimes, but I actually kind of like those people problems
Yes.
because then you have to think around how you communicate those things to different people. This is where teaching does good teachers become useful. So where you step back and you basically say, I don't know, you um, everyone knows what a beach ball is, and then you say, okay, you use frames of reference that are common between the 2
Hmm.
points to make other people understand the reciprocals of their field. And I get a kick out of that. And then that can feed into hopefully making me a better communicator. And then that can make me a better salesperson because sales
Yes.
is usually about communicating value and things like that. So I do personally really enjoy that bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then you create something that's bigger than the sum of the parts. I think that's where academia could be better in the sense that they tend to you become an expert in a maybe it'll never change, but you become a very narrow expert in X rather than sort of across two things. There are exceptions. There are more and more people that cross multidisciplinary
Hmm.
boundaries. But then the problem for in the academic system is um, the way that they're incentivized and judged then doesn't fit with that framework.
No.
You, so, whereas biotech, it's the outcome of the collective, not the individual, and I really like that. But that's true of many other companies as well. It's
No,
less about the
absolutely.
individual, more about the collective.
Yeah, which, sometimes accounts for some of the challenges people have transitioning between the two. But this is
Yeah,
this is a rabbit hole I could continue to go down for a long, long time.
yeah. But it's I don't know. I think I don't know. Going back to one of your earlier points, so you said about like what if you want to start a biotech business, you want to work. Well, I said you want to potentially work in a startup or another
Mm,
business, but the other things that most academics or most people that come from, say, an academic but track, curiosity, insane
yes.
drive to learn stuff. That's another thing that helps. Like just wanting, like some people, and that's fine. That's okay. Some people don't want, like they say, I know how to do this really well, and this is what I want to do for
Yeah.
20 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Great. Work in a large industrial company, and you will be highly valued and sought after.
Yes.
You do not need to, don't get distracted by, ooh, startups are amazing. If your personality and your makeup doesn't fit with that, don't try and force it.
Hmm.
It doesn't really usually work out very well. Um,
No.
but if you love learning new things and doing and stepping into zones of things that you're not qualified to do at all, starting a business is one of them. Raising a child is another. That's a
Yes.
different topic.
There's a lot of similarities, but we
Yeah,
won't get into
yeah.
that. Um, Adam, it's been fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sorry.
And best of luck with everything.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.